Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Dr. Adrienne Battle. She's the director of Metro Public Schools. Dr. Battle, one of the biggest sources for funding for Metro schools has always been the state of Tennessee. The governor has presented to the legislature a new formula for how monies will be allocated from the state. The old plan is old and it's very controversial. In fact, it's been a subject of lawsuits. Metro has a lawsuit, I think, that's sort of in abeyance right now while this new formula is being looked at. Do you think this new formula is any better, or do you have some concerns about it?
Yeah, so one of the things I want to make clear is that it's actually not true with regards to how much we receive from the state. In fact, it's quite the opposite with regards to how the BEP should fund schools, particularly here in Nashville. We see the opposite with our local tax dollars picking up about 70% of our operating budget, and the state around and a little below the 30% threshold. And so what we're hoping to see is for that to begin to shift with regards to the state's contribution to our operating budget right here in Nashville.
Well, you sound like, perhaps given this lawsuit that I mentioned before, that given what you're seeing in this formula, you might want to stick with the lawsuit after, assuming this new formula is approved, because it doesn't seem to be that big an improvement.
Well, what I'll say to where we are with the new formula is that it takes a student-based budgeting approach, which is something we do here in Metro Nashville Public Schools. In fact, for many years, that's how we've leveraged our operating budget. And so what we're looking for is to make sure that this new formula actually is student-based minded, and that it serves all the unique learning needs of our students as well as the students all across the state.
Well, the governor talks about his plan, his new formula. It takes into account poverty for individual students, takes account English language learners, and lots of other challenges, particularly in urban areas. But it appears this year Nashville's only getting $12 million more in state funds. How did we get left out? I mean, we have all these urban problems that he talks about, yet when you look at how much money the state's adding in, not much.
Yes, a very small percentage of $1 billion investment in education. And so in a lot of ways we do feel like we're being left out of the current formula. And so we're thinking of and trying to share the recommendations and the needs of our students so that they're not left out and we can continue to take to scale and operate at an efficient level.
I read one media interview recently, I think it was at Axios, where an aide to the governor said that Nashville's not getting more money because the city got too much money under the old formula. How do you react to that? Does it kind of make you mad?
It's laughable. I think that it's clear to everyone that we've been woefully underfunded, particularly from the state when we're looking at our BEP formula. I agree with the weights that are there. We do need to pay careful attention to the unique learning needs of our students, but I don't think we've ever been in a space where we've received too much money to serve our students. We've been woefully underfunded, and so what we're trying to do is to make sure we have adequate funding for our students so that we can get the outcomes that we know they deserve and are capable of.
Lawmakers say they still have a lot of questions about this, but the formula did advance in committees in both houses this past week. So it may be approved this year, it may not. If there is more time, what would you like to see changed in this formula?
Yeah, I think there's some space for looking at things like creating a floor or base of around 50%. No school district should fall below that threshold, and putting an undue stress on local taxpayers to fund their education systems. And quite frankly, Nashville's been doing a lot of providing the necessary investments for not only Nashville, but for other districts across the state. I think there has to be consideration around the cost differential factor. We know that Nashville is a driver of economics for the state, but our students and our learning community should benefit from that. And we've got to look at how we're defining economically disadvantaged students. We know that we have a lot of unique needs. We know the cost of living here in Nashville, and we need to capture as many of our students who truly do have the needs that require additional investments.
In terms of current enrollment in Metro schools, there was a decline that occurred during the pandemic. Are you beginning to see that this is going to change, or are we still seeing a sort of a slow loss of students?
Well, and I'll be clear that with regards to the shifts we saw in our enrollment, yes, there were some of it, just like other districts, due to the pandemic, but we're also seeing shifts in our enrollment due to the gentrification that's happening right here in Nashville. We're at a stabilization space, and we're seeing upticks with regards to enrollment in our students, and we're paying careful attention to that as we move forward. Of course, making sure that we're we're providing the necessary resources and supports for all of our students as enrollment continues to grow.
You continue to see more and more requests on the local level from private groups, also from nonprofit groups, to put more charter schools in Nashville. That seems to have been a source of friction between the school board and some of those folks coming in to do that, and with the state. Are charter schools a good thing? Why are they so controversial?
You know, we have lots of choice here in Nashville. We have our charter schools, we have our district-run schools, we have our magnet options and specialized schools, and so I'm not quite sure about what the intention is, other than recognizing that right here in Nashville we have lots of options and choices for our families.
Well, they do create more choices, but critics say it sucks money away from the rest of the public schools. So how do you resolve that? I mean, they are public schools, they are approved, they have to be funded by somebody. Should they all be funded by private sources or to become public schools? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I think what we've got to be careful of as we're thinking about school choice and some of the push that we're getting, particularly external to MNPS, is recognizing that in growing in that space, it does cause a strain on our ability to really fund our traditional schools, our district-run schools, and making sure they have the quality resources and educators they need to serve students.
The Director of Metro Schools, Dr. Adrienne Battle, is our guest on Inside Politics. We'll continue our conversation with him on the other side of these messages. Stay with us.